Welcome to the 902 Podcast, the official podcast of the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm Captain Vik, and I want to thank you for listening. This podcast will give you an inside look at LSO with topics and guests to discuss public safety issues impacting Lancaster County. Be sure to subscribe for highlights on news, cases, and the people working for you at LSO. You can also follow us across social media at LSO Nebraska on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Welcome to the 902 Podcast. We're in studio today with Sheriff Wagner, as always, and Chief Deputy Ben Houchin. Hi, guys.
Good morning.
Morning. Happy Monday.
Yes, and Monday is here. What we're here to talk about with our Inside LSO episode. A lot of football over the weekend. There were some might say some questionable calls in a few NFL games, and so there's people that are Monday morning quarterbacking, football games, but sometimes we think that we might Monday morning quarterback ourselves a little bit when it comes to reports around here. You've never been accused of doing that, have you, Ben?
No, not at all. Being the captain of the criminal division, and even when I was in patrol, you do a lot of reviewing of what transpired during the time that you aren't there, and even when you are. And the way we do that is reviewing reports and making sure that I's are dotted and T's are crossed and all those things, that we're doing it properly. So, for people that don't know and people that are listening, and even for some of our deputies here, what does a Monday morning look back? What does a Monday morning look like for the sheriff and the chief deputy at LSO?
Well, our typical morning, regardless of the day of the week, is we get here, we generally look at our calls for service for the previous 24 hours, or that we were off duty, and and then check the reports that are associated with those calls for service, and then see what's going on with this one. Is there work that needs to be done, follow-up needs to be done on this case? Is this case something the media would be interested in that we need to sort of bone up a little bit and get more informed on? And then we get our command staff together in the morning, and we find out from each of the commanders what's going on in their division, and then media at 9:30. And we do those jointly with LPD and LFR, doing those. We're at three days a week now, unless we have something else come up. Yeah,
I'll call them or email them on Tuesdays and Thursdays and let them know if we have anything for them to report on. And we also have changed how we are doing media, because we're doing it live on Facebook now, and that we haven't been doing that for very long. What is it now? 6 months, something like that?
Probably so. It's probably about the same time that we started this podcast. We got some new equipment, and we've been trying to do a little bit more of our own production so people can hear the audio a little bit better and things like that. So,
and you don't just have to rely on the media outlets to get our message out. And like we've talked about before, they only have a few minutes to talk about what has happened, if it's a big deal, and even less if it's not. And that way we can get our message out and what actually ended up happening and how we dealt with it.
So this last weekend, just for example, and we're looking at the calls, not a real crazy weekend, relatively speaking. A few domestics, fires, pursuit, but all in all, I think, knock on wood a little bit, but we would call that a fairly quiet weekend around here.
Yeah, the one thing that doesn't show up there is DWI arrests and driving under suspension arrests, and all the other things that the deputies are out doing that doesn't require a incident report.
So we also have coroner investigations that happen daily.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know sheriff coroner reports are a big source of reading material for you.
It's a very important aspect of our jobs.
So, what are we looking for when we're looking at these reports, whether it's a Monday morning, a Tuesday morning, and why?
Well, you have to look at the incident. Is it a criminal matter, or is it not a criminal matter? So, a fire, for instance. We had a couple of fires this weekend. Well, one was started because of a burn without a burn permit. Mm-hmm. So that sort of dabbles into the criminal side of the world. The other one was a
fifth wheel that caught on fire.
A fifth wheel caught on fire, and no indication.
Appear to be accidental.
Yeah, or accidental. So we're not gonna get much involved in that. So
mm-hmm.
Then if you look at something that let's say a domestic disturbance,
mm-hmm.
was there grounds for an arrest? Did we make an arrest? If so, did we have probable cause to make the arrest?
Mm-hmm.
Was it a number of different factors involved there? Were there children involved? What happened to the children? Were they left with one of the non-offending parent or with relatives? And so those calls for service can really sort of branch out into many, many different segments depending upon how that case unfolds.
Mm-hmm. I guess we look at it as a little bit of a quality assurance type of process. Would you disagree, Ben?
No, I mean, we have a lot of eyes on it. Now, I don't know if it's the job of the chief deputy or the sheriff to be doing.
Hopefully you're not catching
the real deep quality control, because
right.
they have there's the investigators and the deputies, they're working the call. They have a sergeant that's going to end up approving it, and then a captain who also will be putting eyes on that. And it's one thing here at the sheriff's office is the quality of our reports. I would say in the last 15, 20 years have been very high. There's a high standard, and we want to make sure we continue with that, because that's how the prosecutor is going to know exactly what happened. That's how the deputy, if they have to go testify, is going to be able to remember what transpired. And it is so important. And it also, like if the use of force incidents, it gives you the justification of using force on that. And we're real big on making sure you paint that picture so that anybody who reads that report would understand why you did what you did.
Right. And Sheriff, I know that you've got 84 when we're full strength, 84 deputies here that work for you. You know all of your deputies by name, but you don't always get to see them every day.
Right.
So and I know when I was growing up too, that was how you got to know us, was through our reports.
You look at you could actually see the professional progression of deputies when they're new. The reports might not be very good; they may not flow real well, and as they mature professionally and as they learn more, they learn to tell that story in a chronological fashion that really makes sense. Hit the high points. Hit those important legal aspects that they need to hit, and you just see them improve as a professional law enforcement officer.
I can remember as a deputy working third shift, and I worked the weekends, and so I was off Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So I remember taking that first look at my email and just kind of cringing and just hoping that I didn't have something waiting in there for me, of something that I messed up.
What were you thinking?
I know. And I, what? I think a little bit of that is just the nature of the beast. I know there's some of that still goes on. That progression that you're talking about, I can remember, as an FTO and then as a sergeant, joking, not joking. I mean, my goal was to kind of sack the Monday morning quarterback, because I wanted my reports to go through without anybody having any question as to what happened. And so I guess I tried to, hopefully get myself to the point and then train others to get to the point of think through, don't see it from the eyes of a deputy, but hopefully see it through the eyes of the people that are reading it. What are the questions that somebody would have? If somebody was looking at this after you did it, how would they know that you did a good job with your investigation?
Well, the one thing too is with the sergeants, a lot of times on major incidents, they're out there.
Yeah.
And so then they read the report. Well, they can fill in the blanks because they were there.
Mentally, they can fill in the blanks.
Yeah. So sometimes that's the hardest thing, I think, for some of the sergeants learn is I have to read it like I was not there and I don't know anything, and it needs to paint the picture, because then you catch things, because that's how we're reading it. We don't know what happened.
Certainly.
And so that's where you can start asking the questions of, what transpired here. And, you got to get the who, what, when, where, and how. down for all those reports.
Well, but you guys made a good point, is that the people that are going to read these next are going to be your prosecutors, are going to be judges, other people in the legal system.
Oh, and don't forget the defense attorneys. They're going to read it really well.
Yes. And people that are making, very big decisions that are going to affect people's lives on what's written in those reports. So I think it's only right.
Every profession has their own little lexicon. They've got their own little abbreviations and phrases and that sort of slang, if you would. Mm-hmm. So it's really important for me that we not use law enforcement slang or abbreviations or jargon, because somebody else reading that, a pathologist or a prosecutor, may have no idea what that means. Mm-hmm. And it can be an important factor. So it's really important that we tell it, just like you said, we have to do our reports like we're telling a story to somebody who has absolutely no knowledge of what's going on.
Well, I catch myself doing media sometimes, throwing out acronyms and things like that, and you're like, oh, they don't know what that means. And it's so burned into our minds. You just say it, and then you start, that's one good thing about having somebody videotape you, and they can start talking to you and telling you, hey, this is happening, and people aren't understanding that. And so you can learn from that and get better, because talking with the media and that, it's a talent.
Well, even in here, and I know you've caught us a couple times when we've thrown out an acronym or something, just on the podcast in the studio, and trying to make sure that we spell that out for people that may not be familiar. So, it's very important to keep your audience in mind, and we do very much pride ourselves on professional, accurate, complete reports of all of our law enforcement.
Good example is I was talking to somebody about LSO. And they said, "You're in the Lincoln Symphony Orchestra?" I said, no. So different things mean different things to different people. So.
Right. Oh, yeah. And I have yet to have Barbara Zock hit me up and say that we're stealing their acronym. That hasn't become a real big professional conflict yet.
I think we've had it longer.
I think there may be evidence to hold the title, but we'll just let bygones be bygones. Yeah. So, you mentioned Monday mornings or any morning, we're reviewing the last 24 hours. But again, for people that don't know, you guys don't just, sit around and hope that nothing bad happened overnight. We still have mechanisms that if there are major incidents that you guys are notified of certain things overnight. I know I've gotten calls. I've had to call you about, certain crimes or fatal crashes, things that involve special circumstances. So
yeah, anytime that there's a death, usually that's not natural, or we're getting notified of what happened and getting us up to speed on that even in the evening times.
Yeah, and getting the right resources in place, and natural disasters and all those sorts of things. So.
Yeah, that's the main thing on a major crime, homicide or motor vehicle crash. Do our folks have all of the tools necessary to complete the investigation that they're working on, or take care of business? Do they need one of us out there to take care of the media for them if they don't have time to do that? So we just want to make sure our folks have all the tools they need to get that case worked.
Yeah.
If you want a challenging career, a career where you can make a difference in your life, your family's life, and the lives of those in your community, come and join the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office. To learn more or to apply, visit us online at www.joinlso.com.
With just a daily workflow of a call that came in, so in the last 24 hours we had a couple domestic assaults. So it's probably worth just walking through, so people realize just what the filter is that those reports come through before they make it to the court system. But you've got a deputy that goes out to the scene, maybe a few deputies that are going to go out there and they're actually going to work the incident. We're kind of spoiled now because we have body cameras, and I know there's a lot of agencies that have maybe moved to that see body camera type of report, but that doesn't necessarily help people have a good summary of the incident. So I know we're still big on really trying to make sure that our deputies are pushing some sort of narrative summary in a report and that it needs to be consistent, obviously, with the body cam and supported by all the evidence that they have. But they're going to be responsible for writing out their summary of what took place in that call. And
their in-car camera and their body cam should just be a supporting documentation for their written narrative.
Right. And I think that's still something important just for our deputies to remember. And I know it's something we stress in training, is that they really have to be the caretaker of the evidence that they're providing. You know, the digital photographs they may take, the body cam that they have, any physical evidence at the scene. But I think one of the most important things is that report, because that's really going to be the package that holds everything together and puts it in context. But from there, we have some reports that deputies can type themselves, some that are still dictated and then transcribed by a records system specialist up in our records division. But that first review step is really going to be, in a lot of cases, a patrol sergeant, might be an investigative sergeant, but our sergeants are really kind of the gatekeepers for our quality assurance. Back to that, point, Ben, of hopefully you're not the first one that's seeing some of this stuff, but we do rely on those sergeants to see that.
Well, the one thing you gotta remember too is if this happens at 3:00 in the morning and you're third shift on there and it's your Saturday or your Friday, you're going to be off.
Yeah.
That sergeant may not even be able to see any of the reports because he or she gets off duty prior to that. So, we have our criminal sergeants and our patrol captains reviewing those, and it's just really important. And we stress very hard that the sergeants they should probably be reviewing all the reports that are occurring in patrol, but especially your own people, and knowing what's going on and, giving them assistance when they're not quite up to par.
Yeah. And it is a growth type of thing. I know my reports certainly, maybe mine would look more like a bell curve, not starting out very well, did all right. And gosh, if I had to write, some of these reports today, I'd be in trouble. But hopefully people are getting better and staying better as they go on throughout their career.
Well, and, if you are a DWI guy, DUI guy, driving drunk, you're after those. You kind of get in your mind of how those they're never always exactly the same, but you're doing the same steps, throughout the testing process of that individual. So I think as you do more and more and more, it just becomes a ton easier.
Well, and sometimes, you get better because you learn the hard way. When you're on the defense stand and, somebody asks you some tough questions and you're like, gosh, I wish I had a better answer for that, but I don't because I didn't put it in my report.
That's the best way to self-evaluate your reports is when you get on the stand.
Yeah.
If you did a good job on your reports, it'll help you when you have to testify. If you didn't do a good job, you're going to look stupid.
Well, the one thing, too, is if you do a really good job, you may not have to testify because they plead.
Yes, and it's handled without any need to even go to court.
Correct.
So,
I think the other aspect of our reports is not only the narrative portion of what happened, but making sure the people we contact, we have accurate information about those people, because if their name is entered in our system wrong, and they're, for whatever reason, either a warrant has been issued or there's further court proceedings, it could start involving the wrong person rather than the person that's intended for. And I don't know if that makes sense or not, but
certainly,
it's really important that we make sure our name entry, our names that are submitted by the deputies are true and accurate, and it's William, not Bill.
Yep.
It's Robert, not Bob.
And I know that came in really big on coroner reports because we use that information to prepare, ultimately for the county attorney to prepare death certificates.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And gosh, I remember there was, a few times that, the sheriff found that this name wasn't quite right or this date of birth was off a day. I'm like, gosh darn it, for all the people in the office to catch that. But hey.
It's attention to detail.
Yeah.
Yes.
Those little things are important.
Yeah, and it's real big on getting correct addresses and getting correct phone numbers and all that, and double checking with those people and not just relying on the computers to say, oh, they live here, and is actually asking and getting it updated. Because if something ends up happening, we need to find this person again. There's nothing worse than seeing an address that's incorrect, and you're wasting your time. And lo and behold, we knew that they'd moved, or it wasn't put into a report to be changed.
You know how often you've been typing out a text message or an email and you get autofill, autocorrect? The same thing happens sometimes with our internal processes, and you've got to really check that, make sure that it didn't autofill or autocorrect incorrectly,
Yeah, well, and we're fortunate, as an agency that sometimes the saying is, we're big enough to serve, small enough to care. And I guess it's a good thing that we do have time from top to bottom to pay such close attention to our reports, because I think there are some other agencies throughout the country who are just taking calls and so busy with all of the things that some of those details kind of get left by the wayside because they're on to the next thing. And so I'm very glad that as an agency we have the steps in place, but also the culture in place to have that accountability for exceptional reports from top to bottom.
Well, like working criminal, there's nothing worse than getting a report from a patrol and you have to go back out and contact the victim because this wasn't asked or that wasn't asked or this wasn't put in the report. And, that's a waste of time for the investigator having to do that. So, yeah, it's real important to paint that picture at first.
We'll probably have a follow-up episode at some point with criminal, just to talk about, our case management and how that works. But I think some people listening may not know that our deputies are generalist deputies for the most part.
Yes.
So do you want to talk about follow-up assignments at all? Just, how that, you lived in that role for a while, Ben. So that another Monday morning or any morning of the week, what's going through a case manager's mind when they're sorting out who gets what for follow-up?
Well, one is, how detailed or how big is the case? Is it going to take a lot of time on that? There's certain cases that patrol deputies can do during their shift period of it, but you can't have somebody down 8 hours trying to investigate a crime when they're supposed to be out taking calls for service and doing that. And that's the reason, that's the big point of what how you go about choosing. Now, sometimes there's certain deputies that put in a lot of effort and time on their case and they want to see it through, and you'll give them to them and do that part. But most of the time is the seriousness of the case. Have we been having a rash of burglaries? And, we just need to make sure we get it to somebody that can spend a lot of time and working on it. And the one good thing about our criminal division is they go after crime as a group. And so it's not just one investigator working. It comes as a team. And I think we get a lot of stuff more solved because of that.
And, Sheriff, for someone that may not know what we mean when we say generalist investigator, so there are a lot of calls that a deputy will get, and that will be their call to investigate from
start to finish,
all the way.
It could be a vandalism to a mailbox. It could be a burglary of a business. It could be a follow-up on a death investigation, on a coroner's investigation. So, so just like Ben was saying, you've got to, as the case manager is going to look at those and decide whether this should stay with the deputy who responded or whether it's going to be transferred to investigations for a further in-depth view.
And some of it you're looking at, is this case even solvable? I mean, if you're out there and somebody hits a mailbox, there's no neighbors, there's no cameras, there's no physical evidence. That's just, it got ran over. And,
of course, if it's solvable, a criminal's going to take it.
Yeah, see, I was waiting for somebody to say that. That's what they say all the time. That's been the running joke, I think, ever since I was, working either patrol or as a criminal. It's, if it's solvable, it'll land in criminal. Yeah.
But I think back to the reports thing, that's another kind of quality assurance thing, because a lot of the follow-up questions that are back to a deputy may simply be because of a lack of information or lack of clarity in their report.
Yes.
They may have already done that step that needs to be done. They just haven't reported it so that it can't be verified on the other end.
If it's not written down, it didn't happen.
Right.
And that's kind of where you go with it on those.
And you have to,
Yes.
And we do spend a lot of time, even when kids get back from the academy. I say kids, sometimes we have lateral candidates as well, but we spend hours going over report writing with them, and during FTO, and unfortunately, reports are really one of the areas, especially at the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office, that there is no guarantee that you're going to graduate the FTO program when it comes to reports, because we do have a standard that is it's just a little bit higher than I think a lot of places, and maybe higher than some people are used to. But it all goes back to that accountability and holding that standard.
Well, there's nothing better than when the county attorney's office calls down and just says, "Hey, they pled. That was a heck of a case. You guys did all the right steps. The reports were rock solid and all that." And that's how you help the victim of a crime. If you don't put in your heart and the effort that you need to, and one, it doesn't get solved, or two, it doesn't get prosecuted because it wasn't done right, or whatnot. It's important to be able to make sure you're doing those reports and doing them correctly, because that's who we're working for, is the citizens and victims.
Yeah.
Well, Sheriff, that's kind of a good segue, and we talk about this on a lot of episodes with whatever topic we're talking about. But today we're talking about reports, and I think Ben started down that road. But how do good reports and having that standard for reports make Lancaster County a safer place?
Well, if you don't have, just like Ben just said, if it's not in a report, it didn't happen. And so when you do have a major case that's going to court, a violent crime or a high-dollar property crime or any crime, it's important that when the county attorney looks at that case, files it in court, and we need the reports to be able to ensure that we had probable cause to make the arrest, to make sure we're not violating the rights of the accused, and then ultimately seeking conviction on the crime that occurred. And so, if it's a bad guy, and we get a conviction, hopefully they'll go someplace where they can be not victimizing other folks. And I think that's our job.
Well, I think another thing we end up doing here is we just don't work on to make an arrest. All you need is probable cause. But in our belief, and I've always lived it, is we need beyond reasonable doubt. That's what our standard is. That's what we are working for. And if I'm not going to be able to get anything better than probable cause, the county attorney is not going to prosecute. So why make that arrest at that time? Let's see what else we can do and go from there. And sometimes you just can't. But
begin with the end in mind.
That is our goal right there, is to see it all the way through court. And another thing is when you investigate and do reports, it's not just getting the guilty, but it's also proving the innocent. And that is as important as anything too.
Yeah. Well, reports. Any other closing thoughts?
It's one of those paperwork in every profession.
It's part of the deal.
It's all part of the deal, and it's a huge part of law enforcement work, and we just make sure that our reports get done correctly and accurately, and help us do our job better.
The one thing before the day of the computers and all that, when I would tell people asking me what's your most important tool, and I'd pull out my pen, because that is the number one important thing, is getting your documentation down. And this is the funny thing too, because CSI on television, all these things, or you see a cop show and they all seem to just walk away from the scene and move along, and that is so far from the truth. What transpired there is minimal for what's going to end up happening on the writing of the reports and doing all those different things.
And we always took field notes. We had a running stenographer's notebook on our field notes that were eventually converted to our final report. But today, some deputies even take their mobile data terminal in with them to a scene, and they'll type out the report as they're talking with the victim. So, it's a little bit different in that regard.
It's part of the reason I can't watch cop shows and cop movies anymore, because I just think of all the reports it's going to take to, cover up that car chase and And,
the cars exploding and all that stuff, and
people flying everywhere, and they make it look so nice and tidy at the end of that. But a lot of paperwork goes into wrapping all that stuff.
It's amazing
up,
what 3 minutes of action would cause you 10 hours of paperwork.
100%. Well, that's all the time that we have for today's episode of the 902 podcast. We appreciate everybody listening today. If you've got more questions about this episode or others, be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts. If you're interested in careers at the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office, check out joinlso.com. We've got lots of information out there about careers as a deputy, but also as professional staff members. We're currently advertising positions for a systems programmer and also for security guards on our campus security team. Be sure to send us an email if you're interested in getting in touch with us, lso@lancaster.ne.gov, or on social media @LSO Nebraska. Thanks everybody for listening.